Hi, everyone. Let me go through the questions, answers, and rationale for, I guess this is the fourth exam? Yeah, the fourth exam in our healthcare ethics class, fourth and last one. Okay. Excuse me. First question, I won't read the entire thing, but it has to do with a real event that occurred a long time ago in 1998. Jack Kevorkian, you can look at him, Google him, and you'll find all kinds of information. And he gave a lethal injection to a patient of his, Thomas Hugh, who suffered from Lou Gehrig's disease. But the question asks, how might James Rachel's arguments be applied to this case? So Rachel's wrote that piece even further back, 1975, on active and passive euthanasia, where he talked about both of them, but he specifically focused on whether sometimes active euthanasia might be preferable to passive euthanasia because it was more humane. And so this connects to letter D. Let me focus on that. Let's see if I can do that. Letter D. Rachel's would disagree with the prosecutors in this case. He would argue that Kevorkian's decision was humane, and because it saved the gentleman from needless suffering. And so you can really connect that to what Rachel's argument is over there. Second question has a few things in it. Kathy believes very strongly in the complete pro-life argument, meaning pro-life from conception or fertilization to natural death. Her mother is dying of cancer, and she's indicated in an advance directive that she does not want to be resuscitated, so she wants to be DNR. They both live in Oregon, and her mother asks her opinion about ending her life through the Death with Dignity Act. How is Kathy likely to respond? So again, the Death with Dignity Act, even though it is a form of passive euthanasia, absolutely would interfere. It would conflict with someone who believes that in the complete pro-life argument. Now, we didn't really talk about the notion of a complete argument. Even though your essay question was about pro-life and Death with Dignity Act, but the Death with Dignity Act requires, first of all, a physician to write a prescription and an individual to take that barbiturate, Seconal for the most part, to end their life. And so Kathy wouldn't be supportive of discussing the Death with Dignity Act with her mother. Third question, and you can certainly write that to a point, understanding passive euthanasia, understanding how the Death with Dignity Act works. Number 3 is in the sandwich generation, and this is in the film 9 to 90 with Phil and Joe Sabatini. But this has to do with concerns about who should they have the ability to drive. Now, we never specifically spoke about in 9 to 90 who would have the ability to drive. It didn't come up in the film. But I'm asking you to apply the notion of a sandwich generation and what happens in what was happening in 9 to 90 to this applied example. So, but the question is, what's the primary ethical issue related to this decision? The primary ethical issue, okay, related to the decision of who should drive. And the answer is B. Older adults may often regard driving as a continuous right of autonomy. It is a form of autonomy. It's a choice that people make, but it allows them the freedom, the choice to exercise that. Now, some of you put down letter C. Older adults often rely on children, grandchildren to drive them, which they view as a burdensome imposition. Now, that is an absolute true statement. It's a true statement. They regard it as burdensome. It's a burden on the adult children and grandchildren. The older adult feels like they're imposing a burden as well. And that comes from lacking the choice or the autonomy being removed from them. So when autonomy, which is the primary ethical issue, is removed, then there is a burden put into place. It flows that is instilled by the older adult and put on others. And so the primary ethical issue is having to do with losing this notion of autonomy, losing their freedom, their choice, their ability to make a decision, in this case, driving. Cody's physician in How to Die in Oregon is Catherine Morris. She agreed to be her prescribing physician because she was her doctor. And that was a line that she gave in the film. What does she mean by that? She was her physician, and so she supported Cody's decision, Cody's autonomy, through their relationship as well. So the physician-patient relationship, or the patient-person relationship, which is something we spoke quite a bit about in this course, is based on trust, is based on communication. It could be based on the, but it's also about supporting her autonomy. Okay. Fifth one has to do with the Narrative Matters essay, which you read for a quiz. The author, Dr. Mueller, says in the next to the last line of the essay, he's been preparing for this moment for years. I felt privileged to help him achieve his aims. What's the ethics rationale? Excuse me. For that. And it really has to do with the physician alleviating his patient's suffering. That actually comes out in the essay as well. And, this obviously has to do with voluntary stopping eating and drinking, not Death with Dignity Act. And so even though there is, if an individual chooses that, and there's a communication with the clinical team, hopefully their pain is controlled. If they're in a healthcare setting or hospice, it is controlled. But the suffering that they're also talking about is the emotional suffering, let's say the mental suffering, not just the physical suffering as well. Sixth question has to do with Roger Atkins. Again, this is a true story. I'm not going to read the entire thing, except he has rheumatoid arthritis, key thing. But the question asks, even if the patient were fully competent, why would most supporters of physician-assisted suicide object to this? Why would they object? His present condition is not does not constitute actively dying. It certainly is debilitating, painful, and chronic, but it is unclear. In fact, it is probably more clear in this case that he is not terminally ill, actively dying. And so that really is a part of not just the Death with Dignity Act in Oregon, but every state that's enacted it, really sort of the rules. And the last question is your short essay question. Now, I think for most of you, you took a pretty good stab at this because you had it in advance, which is great. Having examples from stuff that we've discussed in the past is even better, or some of your content. So pretty pleased with how each of you approach this. So listen, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Talk to me about it as well. Thanks very much, folks.